The only thing that we still need to look at is what else this window is doing. Perhaps there's something very fancy in it. Well, no, there isn't. If you look at the window code itself, we have the speak that we are talking about, and this is the parameter that says that this speak is not blocking, so it's done in asynchronous mode. And because of that, here there is an example of what you do when you want to wait till one text has been entirely spoken. So you check with the speak reading in progress, and if it's still in progress, you wait, and that's it, in a loop. After that, you put the buttons as active. Why doing it that way and not doing it with blocking voice? Well, I'm guessing in order for to window to be displayed during that time or something like that, but clearly it would have been an option also, just block while you are talking. Now, what else do we have in here? The read button clearly is reading that. So what is it in it? Well, just the speak of the text with the value of the slider. Really nothing. Save as. So this allows us to save the text as an audio file. So we have the selector to choose which file we want to save in, and then speak to file, this global procedure that we already saw, that is just redirecting the output to a WAV file. And then to read the file, it's just the regular sound function. So really absolutely nothing in this. Now the exit, well, there's nothing at all, which means that it is in the Windows exit code, closing code. Okay, what are we doing? If there is something talking during this time, we are stopping it, and we're requesting clearly to end it, but it may take some time for the engine to answer, so we are waiting till there is nothing done at that level, and then we are saying goodbye, and that's it. And you see that this time here, this is the blocking mode. This will wait till the text has been taken before the program closes. So what do we have to incorporate text-to-speech in our application? 2 click to insert the assembly inside our code, and 4 big, scary global procedure that are doing 3 lines of code each. That's all. So as you can see, it is extremely powerful, and the only problem, because it's so simple that it's crazy, the only problem is to know what to call. It's not a question of syntax or this or that. It's object. Okay, you have to understand the object, and that should give you another motivation, if you need one, to work with object. But that's all there is to it. After that, you just call the procedure in the order that the other developer decided for you. You just need to find out which order that is. Of course, as soon as you decide that you want to use an .NET assembly inside your program, you will find there is a series of problems. The first one is to choose the right assembly, and you've seen that just here installed on my computer there are already what looks like hundreds of them, and I didn't install anything specific. There were some by HP, some by Microsoft, some this, some that, the other. So lots of assembly to choose from, and you have to find the right one. That is not a WinDev problem. That goes directly to the problem of the license, the permissions. What is the permission with the .NET framework from Microsoft? I have no idea. You have to look at the license to see if what you want to do is legal or not, or if you end up having to pay hundreds of dollars every month to Microsoft. I don't know, I haven't looked. Um, but it's something that you have to consider, and of course as soon as you're using something that is outside the scope of the Microsoft framework itself, there is a specific assembly, then you end up with a license, you end up with a cost, and you end up with a cost that can be every year, and it's something that you have to consider seriously. WinDev is a great tool because basically everything that you need is included. And here we're talking about all the things that are not included, and of course this has a cost and you have to consider it carefully. Now the .NET framework, is it installed on your customer machine? Well, sometimes yes, sometimes no, and sometimes not the right version or not all the version, which means that you may need to support your customers with the installation of .NET framework on top of everything else. Now, if you're using one specific assembly that is not on your part of the Microsoft framework, then also is it installed? Do you need to install it yourself? Is the customer going to buy it separately? There's the whole logistic to look at when you're working with this kind of thing. And of course, is the version right or not? And of course, what is going to happen when the next version comes out? Is it going to be compatible? Do I have to pay again? This, that, the other. Lots of easy things to forget when you think about all the possibilities and not of all the problem. So I'm sorry to rain on your parade here, but you have to consider all that before you choose to do this kind of thing. Clearly, it is easy to drown in all the possibilities, and contrary to what we were seeing earlier with the API call, there is no WD.NET tool for help. There's nothing like that in WinDev, and it's basically the wild west. You look on Google and you search for what you need. Remember also, it is entirely and completely all objects. Every .NET assembly is in fact a series of classes and nothing else. So if you don't know how to deal with .NET assembly as classes, then you're in trouble. It's really object. And of course, remember also, there's only one target, Windows. So it may be a problem because you're developing today for Windows and tomorrow a customer asks you to make a version for Mac or for Linux. And because you have been using .NET assembly, you cannot do that because the framework is not available on those systems. So you have to consider all that. I don't want to stop you from using this kind of tools. I just want to make sure that you realize that there may be problem down the line that you need to think about now. And then, of course, in the list of potential problems, we need to talk about the limits. And for that, I'm not going to rewrite everything because once again you should read the help, but it's interesting to look at that together and see what we have. So the help gives you the current state of the limit of using .NET one way or the other in WinDev, in W language. So the first one, the arrays of objects are not supported in this version, which means that if you are trying to use a .NET assembly that is relying on arrays of objects, you are out of luck. It's not supported, and you have to realize that you have to test any .NET assembly that you want to use inside your application before you can say, okay, yes, it's going to work. You have to check that it's not using something that is not currently managed in W language. Now, a W language class cannot be derived from a .NET class. It's all objects, it's all classes, but it's not compatible. If you want to derive a .NET class, it has to be done inside the assembly itself. It cannot be done here. There is no management of multi-thread in the .NET classes. There are several types that are supported: dead time, WinDev currency, that is transformed in decimal number. A decimal parameter passed from .NET assembly is converted into currency if possible, otherwise in double. Structures are okay. Now, when you export a W language class, it's really different. The objects themselves are not supported. They are managed as a regular W language type. The parameter passed between W language and .NET as pointers are not supported. You cannot just use a structure inside a class that is exported as a .NET assembly and expect it to work. It's not supported. Instead, you have to replace the structure by a simple class in which you have all the variables of your structure. So for you it's going to be the same, but otherwise it's not working. And yeah, of course you need to export the class that is used as a structure, otherwise it's not visible in .NET. After that, it's a limitation for WinDev Mobile. We're not going to go into that. And when you're creating an assembly in WinDev, it can be used like any other assembly. However, remember that the WinDev framework, all the WinDev DLL, must also be shipped with your assembly. It's not because you're generating a .NET assembly that you can get rid of your WinDev DLL, and they must be in the same directory than the assembly itself. So that's a list of limits that are here available currently. Currently, I'm saying with .NET. This means that if you want to use a .NET assembly the same way than if you want to use an ActiveX or Relay Automation, you have to test a lot before you can be sure that everything is going to work to the extent that you need it to work in your project. It's not just a done deal like that, unfortunately. Delegate. What is that thing? Well, a delegate is the .NET name for basically the way to manage an event inside the .NET assembly. So something is happening in the code, in the outside code, the .NET assembly. The .NET assembly is doing something on the hardware, is watching something, is running in the background, and it needs to call back your own code. So that's what a .NET Delegate is. It's an event in the assembly, and it's going to call back a specific part of the assembly that you can associate with a W language. For that, you use the .NET Delegate function that is available, and in it you specify a W language procedure. You associate it inside .NET Delegate with a special class which is of delegate type, so it's a specific part of the .NET assembly, and the .NET Delegate function returns to you a .NET object of delegate type. So how to use it? Well, the first thing to do is to find the delegate in the list of classes. It is a class, and again you need to read the fucking manual. It is inside the documentation. There's no other way to know what's what. You need to read the whole documentation of the assembly you're using. Then you need to define your W language procedure so that it has the same parameters than the class in question. And again, you need to read the manual to know what this delegate is going to send you back. Then you need to associate the W language procedure with the delegate class. That's where you use the .NET Delegate. And when the event fires, your W language procedure is called. So that's it. It's all there is to know about the delegate. After that, all the gritty details are in the help file of about .NET Delegate, and you should follow them if you need to use this kind of technique. We are now looking at the other side of the problem, how to make an assembly, and that is surprisingly simple. The same way that it was extremely simple to use .NET assembly, it is extremely simple to create one. It's the other side of the problem. It's the side that will allow you to open your application to the outside world and basically build any type of API you want, offer any type of function that you want from inside your applications. And as an example, we're going to use again an example that is coming standard with WinDev. It's called WD using .NET. I found the name misleading because in that case we are generating a .NET assembly, not using one. Now on the other side, this example also comes with an external source using this assembly that you're creating here. So it gives you the example on how to use it from the outside world, from another language. The first thing that you have to see in that example is the project configuration, and the project configuration is set to .NET assembly. As you can see, there is no assembly inside our project, but if you go in project configuration and look at the current configuration, it is an .NET assembly with name, a different element that should be included in it, and as you can see, there's one window, one class, one set of global procedure, and two really files. And there's basically nothing else. Now, how do you do that? When if you create your project or create a new configuration, the only thing that you do is that you say, okay, I want to do a .NET assembly. At that point, it's going to ask you what you want to include inside your element, and you know that you can have several configurations for one project. So you can have your whole big project and then create a .NET assembly with just a few elements of it. Now, that's about all there is. I'm not finishing it because it's already there, but that's all there is to really say that you create a .NET assembly and that you want to export this specific set of classes. Now, you saw that there are other elements inside the assembly that you're creating, including a window. But this window is not accessible directly from the outside. Only your classes are visible. So when you're doing the generation against the .NET assembly, and it's the same thing basically. So here you create the .NET assembly, okay. You give you the regular information that you give for executable. It's the same thing, same version. Then what you include in it. And clearly here there is one window, one class. Here's the window, that's the project code. So what you need to realize that this WD converter window is not going to be accessible directly. Now, if in your class you're doing an open of the WD converter and you have the window DLL going with your assembly, then yes, it will be usable, but only through your classes. And this is the extremely important thing: public classes of the assembly. That's the only thing that will be visible from the outside. Okay, so it doesn't matter if you use it in C#, in VB.NET, or in another WinDev program. Only the C class will be visible, and that's about it. After that, it's just details and little things, but that's all there is to it. You create some code, you create one or several classes, you export these classes, and these classes are doing what you coded them to do, and that's it. It's the entry point to your functionality. So what else did I need to tell you? Yes, that's already told you that. Include, export or publish what the assembly needs. Remember that only the classes that you are exporting as public are visible from the other side. But if they need something else, if they need a global procedure, if they need windows, if they need reports, if they need anything, you need to include them inside your assembly in order for the classes to be able to use them. And here is to remind you of something that we talked about in the object-oriented course. Here, clearly, the classes contained are driving the UI and not the other way around. So that's something that you need to be aware of. Remember, only the classes are visible, and you can expose anything you want, as little or as much as you want. Really, at that point, you are opening your application to interoperability, so you have to be very careful at what you're exposing, of course, but it is extremely powerful. It is really a huge thing that you can add to your applications.